Good day, everyone. We are the Group 9 and we're going to report about Chapter 3, Lesson 4 and 5. So let's start with the Lesson 4. If an act benefit a lot of people even though some may suffer as a consequence, was it a moral act? Well, we will find out later because today we will explore the theory of utilitarianism founded by Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Miller. Jeremy Bentham. He is widely regarded as a founder of modern utilitarianism. He is a philosopher. His famous works are showing to the principles of morals and legislation and the fragment of government. What led him to believe in the theory of utility is after he read the book of David Hume on the 3 days of human nature. He is expected to follow his father's footsteps as a lawyer, but he did not. Now, what framework should we use in making an ethical decision? The third ethical framework you will be introduced is the utilitarianism by Jeremy Bentham. Utilitarianism. This framework focuses on happiness as a barometer of the right morality through the calculation of more pleasure produced over pain. This is used to determine if an act is morally right or wrong. So you're familiar with our great national heroes Dr. Jose Rizal and Andres Bonifacio. We've learned in our history that they did not die for nothing, but offered their lives for igniting the spirits of liberty and independence, just like Jesus Christ who died on the cross as offering for the mankind's sins. The point of her death is clear for the sake of the people's liberty, independence, and forgiveness of their sins. Utilitarianism. The theory of utilitarianism, or also called as consequentialism, focuses on the effect of the particular end or telos called happiness. According to utilitarianism, the rightness or wrongness of an action is determined by its consequence, and the ultimate goal of human act should be to promote the greatest amount of happiness or pleasure for the greatest number of individuals. So one of the great examples we can use the utilitarianism is about Dr. Jose Rizal, Andres Bonifacio, and Jesus Christ. So even though they offer their lives, they save a lot of people. So they produce a great happiness or pleasure. So we can call it as moral. The first who proposed the idea is David Hume, a philosopher during the modern period, but the ones who have made the idea more depth and made it more profound were Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill. The classical version of utilitarianism as formulated by Bentham can be found up in the 3 points. First is, the basis for an act to be treated as morally right or wrong is in its consequence they produce. It is known as consequentialism. So what is there in the consequence that make it morally right? It is only when there is a presence of happiness. In short, happiness is the key in determining the morality of the act. The second point is, what matters in every act that we do would be the amount of pleasure produced. One must not forget the element of happiness in assessing the morality of the act. So, it doesn't mean nga if naay presence of happiness sa imong act nga gihimo, morally right na din siya. So, it should be that happiness should be greater than the pain produced. So to measure the amount of happiness that is produced, Bentham uses the Felicit calculus, a method that can calculate or measure happiness. The third point, which is happiness experienced by every person, is counted the same. It means that every person's happiness is taken into account and no one is left behind. So to measure the amount of happiness produced, we should use the Felicit calculus. It is the amount of pleasure minus amount of pain equals moral or immoral act. So, if the pleasure is higher than pain, so it is morally right. But if the pain is higher than the pleasure, so that means that the act is morally wrong. Furthermore, one has to consider in assessing an act the following factors. 1. Happiness pleasure should be more intense. 2. Happiness pleasure should last longer. 3. Happiness pleasure should be more certain to occur. 4. Happiness pleasure should be happening sooner rather than later. 5. Happiness pleasure should be produced in turn many happiness and few pains. 6. One has to consider how many people will be affected. The better position would be when there are more people affected positively, that is great happiness for the greatest number of people and fewer affected negatively. So to deeply understand the theory of utilitarianism, let's watch a video.
Utilitarianism is the view that actions are morally permissible if and only if they produce at least as much net happiness as any other available action. In other words, the more happiness and less suffering that results from our actions, the better the action is. And the right action is the one that produces the greatest balance of happiness over suffering. In fact, according to utilitarianism, can look very hard to resist. We can break the utilitarian thesis up into two parts: a theory of what is valuable and a theory of right action, given what's valuable. First, the theory of what's valuable. It says that the only thing that's valuable in its own right is happiness and the absence of suffering. Other things, like money, might be derivatively valuable because it helps us get happiness. Second, the theory of right action. The right action is the one that maximizes, produces the most of what's valuable, or if that's uncertain, that produces the most expected value. If you put those two pieces, the theory of what's valuable and the theory of right action given what's valuable, together, you get utilitarianism. Here's a very simple example. Let's say I'm a doctor and I have only 5 doses left of some very scarce medicine. In an emergency situation, I'm left with 6 patients, all of whom need the drug to survive. But one of them, let's call her needy, will survive only if I give her all 5 doses of the drug. The other 5 patients can survive on a single dose each, and we can assume that I know nothing else about these patients. Utilitarianism will tell us to divide up the drug, saving the 5 and allowing needy to die. Why? Because saving the 5 lives preserves much more happiness and prevents much more suffering than saving just 1 life. And in that case, that seems like the right answer. It's important to notice that these two elements of utilitarianism can be separated. We can accept the utilitarian view of what's valuable without embracing its claim about what that means for how we should act. And we can accept the utilitarian claim that the right action is the one that makes the most value without accepting the claim that happiness and the absence of suffering are all that's valuable.
Business fascination and with utilitarianism. So how can we use utilitarianism in the business world? The key word used by Jeremy Bentham is extension. It refers to the extent of pleasure and pain spread throughout the populace. The extent of consequence, which is the greatest good of the greatest number, is determined by the use of Felicie calculus. So since we cannot use the Felicie calculus when there is no presence of problem, other economists, instead of using Felicie calculus, they use cost-benefit analysis. The difference between the calculus of Bentham and the analysis is that economists would use monetary units that present benefits or advantages and drawbacks or disadvantages. So the cost-benefit analysis is that cost-benefit amount of money spent versus amount of benefit or drawback. So if the benefit is lesser than the amount spent, then it is not worth it. Therefore, it is pain. One of the example is that if nag-invest ka pero like dugay kay kakabalik or gamay ra ang kakabalik, so we can say that it is not worth it. Therefore, it's pain.
Which is about justice and fairness promoting the common good. Let me start this discussion by stating one line from the book that states, "There are different definitions of justice, just as there are different thinkers in their respective field of specialization." And in this discussion, I will be uh, tackling about John Rawls' definition of theory or his theory of justice. Now, who is John Rawls? John Rawls is one of the most important philosophers during the 20th century. He is the author of a book named A Theory of Justice and received an academic training at Princeton University and later became a philosophy professor at Harvard. So, according to Rawls, he proposes justice as a fairness as an ethical framework focuses on how justice should be distributed that would yield fairness for those who have more and those who have less. The term fairness refers to equality, not to equality, but equity. No, so in Rawls' views justice, it is acknowledged not only sociological but also political and socio-economic status of the society. So, according to Rawls, justice is evident when it is distributed fairly. Now, so what do we mean by distributed fairly? So in a society, he acknowledged that there are different circumstances of different members of the society. So when we say different distributed fairly, distributed what distributed is justice in terms of economic goods, rights and liberties, or other opportunities that society can offer. So according to him, there are two principles to follow. The first is each person is to have an equal right to the most extensive scheme of equal basic liberties compatible with the similar scheme of liberties of others. The second is social and economic inequalities are to be arranged so that they are both A. Reasonably expected to be everyone's advantage, and B. Attached to positions and offices open to all. So what do these two statements mean? So basically they are just about equality and equity. So what are the difference between the two? So the first statement refers to equality. Diba? As stated, each person is to have an equal right to the most extensive scheme of equal basic liberties. So, of course, equality, kung unsa ang naa sa isa, malawat sad sa isa sa tanan, rather. The second principle is about the principle of difference. He acknowledges that an equal socio-economic status, therefore, he believed that these inequalities should benefit the least fortunate and that opportunities are to be given through employments. No, so muna siya ang kalayan sa equality and equity. No, so, di ba, as stated earlier, there are different definitions of justice. No, so the question is, how does Rawls' definition of justice differ from others? No, so as you can see, ang kani siya nga picture is si Plato. No, so how does Plato's definition of justice differ from Rawls? So basically, si Plato, ang iyang definition of justice is that each member of the society plays along with their role, no, for in order for their society to achieve a common good. So more development siya sa ilang society as a whole. While ang kay Rawls, iyang gina-take into account ang interest sa each member of the society. So that's the difference between the definition of justice, no? So ang kay Plato is development of the society as a whole with each member cooperating, na siya iyang justice. While ang kay Rawls is that ang in different interest, each individual interest, no, so each different circumstances sa members of society is considered. Now, nature of theory. So to sum it up, John Rawls developed a theory of justice based on social contract theory. Rawls argued that equal distribution of resources should be the desirable state of nature instead of following utilitarian philosophies. Rawls speak of justice as distributive. So uh, everyone in the society has to share either the burden or the benefit of what the society offers. So what do we mean by that? So from the word distributive itself, it means properly or fairly shared or distributed, in terms of goods and opportunities of what the society can offer. No, it's, it states here, everyone in the society has to share either the burden of or the benefit of what the society offers, diba? So if there exists who enjoys the benefits, there will be those who accept the benefit. So that is what distributive justice means. Okay, so under this distributive justice, we have different types of distributive justice. Now, under that is one of that is the egalitarian distributive justice. So, first, what do we mean by egalitarian? So, egalitarian, according to its definition, it's relating to believing in the principle that all people are equal and deserve equal rights and opportunities. Okay, so the definition of egalitarian distributive justice, just distribution in terms of receiving an equal share. So, what do you mean by this? Okay, so di ba, self-explanatory, equal share. So, para sa tanan. So, unsa man ang equal share? When we say equal share, what is equal share? Unsa ang share? So, there are two types of justice under egalitarian. There are political egalitarianism and economic. So, when we say political, where legal rights of every citizen are equally observed. So, an example, uh, every citizen, no, so dili sang some, but to every citizen, so means tanan. Every citizen of the country should have the right to choose who is his or her political candidate, should be given the power to govern them. So that is political egalitarianism. So when we say political egalitarianism, dili lang siya covered sa government, but it also covers for the workplace or the daily life. So example una sa work is for example, sa authority, sa boss, or sa principal, he or she has the authority over his employees and could decide what is best or decide what is best for his or her own company. Okay, so moving sa economic egalitarianism, this ano siya nga type sa justice under egalitarian is that um, socio-economic goods refers socio-economic goods are distributed equally. No? So when we say socio-economic goods, it refers to those basic necessities, no? Primarily food, clothing, and shelter that would enable each citizen to have and live a decent life. No? So sa economic egalitarianism, this is where the distribution of economic goods are equally observed. So an example of that is minimum wage law. So every employee is entitled to a just wage in terms of lowest possible wage they can receive from doing legal work according to the law as agreed upon by the government and the private employers.
The capitalist distributive justice. It is the just distribution in terms of receiving one's share according to one's contribution to the overall success of the institution where one is employed. An individual's amount of work is basically directly proportional to what he or she gets. This means that if one does more, one receives more. Do less, then receive less. For example, I get paid 20 pesos for a 2-hour work. If I go beyond 2 hours, like let's say 4 hours, then I get 40 pesos. 6 hours, then I get 80 pesos, and so on. That's the capitalist distributive justice. The socialist distributive justice. It is the just distribution in terms of an individual's needs. We have various needs in life, and in order to achieve those, we need to work hard for it. If we have greater needs, then we expect that our share is greater in the distribution scheme. This also seeks to level our natural inequalities. These natural inequalities refer to our initial endowments in life, like how one is a natural dancer, the other is not, how one has good mathematical skills, and the other has great artistic capabilities, talents for short. Now, if one wants to receive according to the proportion of one's needs, then he or she should utilize one's talent. This mindset came from Karl Marx's idea from each according to his abilities to each according to his needs. The state and citizens' responsibilities to each other, the principles of taxation and inclusive growth. As citizens, we have the obligation to support the government's existence through monetary contributions, which is stated under the 1987 Philippine Constitution. The state possesses inherent powers wherein the government can issue commands for the survival and also maintain the peace and order of the land. One of these powers is the taxation power. The taxation power lets people contribute monetarily to support the government, its existence, and its projects. This power is amended by the legislative body that is composed of lawmakers executed by the executive branch. Necessity and reciprocal duties are the basis of taxation. In necessity, the government collects money from its populace for its existence and expenses. In reciprocal duties, as recipients of the benefits given by the state, we need to pay taxes for the government projects to be carried out smoothly. In conclusion, there should be mutual cooperation between the government and the people. The benefits received for employed citizens, a portion of their income is deducted and paid directly to the BIR, that is called direct tax. Indirect tax is when money is collected from a business entity. The money that comes from the business entity comes from the consumer's pockets. Now, the problem of this principle is this. The mentality that we pay some amount, we expect to receive benefits of the same amount. The role of economics and inclusive growth. Economics is focused on the scarce resources that every member of the society is facing. Inequality in economic growth. Imagine a pie. The pie represents the national income. Usually, the lion's share of the pie is enjoyed by the few. The remaining is then shared to many. The rich enjoy the resources more than the poor. That is inequality in economic growth. Inclusive growth. Economic growth under inclusive growth must create opportunities for all people in different levels of society, with the resources distributed to them accordingly. This growth goes down to the micro level. If it is only limited to the macro level, then it is exclusive growth. And